It is 9 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? I know where one of them is, I think. I think one of them is marching with Unite Here Local 11. So anyway, enough of that foolishness. Hi, welcome to everyone who is here. Hello, everyone who is online, participating with us online. My name is Mike Kinman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the rector here at All Saints Church. It is our Earth Day Sunday, and I'm really happy to introduce you to someone you already know, who is Sarah Nolan. And you probably know Sarah as our Director of Giving, Development, and Economic Justice, and she is definitely that, and she is a lot more. Sarah is a member of the Episcopal General Convention's Task Force on Creation Care and Environmental Racism. She served on a number of boards of emerging organizations, providing financial and strategic development support, and she really is kind of at the heart of the Episcopal Church's work on addressing climate change, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So, welcome, Sarah. Welcome to All Saints Church. First, I would, we sort of got this bonus when we hired you. We got a lot of bonuses when we hired you, but it was, also you have this passion for creation care, and it really does sort of intertwine with your work on giving and economics. And I just sort of love for you to start off just by sort of saying, well, where did this come from for you, and how did you get this passion, and how has it lived out in your life so far?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be here and see you all. And I'm going to preface all of this is that my role today is to share a little bit about my experience and the work of the larger Episcopal Church, because so many of you in here have done this work for so long and also probably know so much more than me about a lot of the work that we're doing to address climate change. But so grateful to be here and share my story. I actually only realized recently that my love for the earth, for creation, my connection was from my childhood growing up in New Mexico. And specifically, my grandfather was a geologist, and he loved to take the family and drive along. In New Mexico, we call them mesas, that flat expanse of land. And when you, especially places where there were roads cut out, you could see the different layers of soil and what they represented, and the ages and the history there. And he knows so much more, and he would talk about that. And he, of course, ended up going into oil and mineral exploration, because that's what you do as a geologist of that time. But he really gave me that initial love for a place and for the amazing history and impact it is to know a place. And I would say it really came from there. And then, I didn't think much about it until I was at school out here, came out to California in the late 90s, early 2000s, went to Azusa Pacific University, and which is where I found All Saints, or I should say All Saints found me, being very evangelical, you Episcopalians. And I participated in a transformational journey that was hosted to the South Central Farm in downtown LA. And at the time, it was the largest piece of undeveloped land and one of the largest urban farms in the entire country. And that was really the beginning for me of an experience of the power of the intersections of the environmental movement with the labor movement. It was my first experience with looking and learning about climate change and environmentalism was through an intersectional lens. And I'm really grateful for that. And the South Central Farm was under threat of eviction, and actually was eventually, all of these farmers were kicked out, and many of them worked in the textile industry in LA, and this is where they grew their food and crops to care to subsidize their food and their livelihoods. And it was a beautiful community, and that was also the beginning of how I got involved in organic agriculture, because I stuck around. I was just really impressed by a place that was creating an alternative vision for how we can be community and how we can sustain our own needs and how we can do that for our community. And I mentioned eventually that the farm was bulldozed. It's now a warehouse for textiles, which is ironic. But many of those farmers ended up with about 100 and some acres in Bakersfield. And so we started growing organically in Bakersfield and bringing that produce into LA. And it was both an economic generator, and that's where I got really interested in economics and the role of that economics play in how we are looking at a multitude of challenges, both looking at livelihoods, people's livelihoods, as well as the care of creation, and doing it in a way that reflects the needs for both human dignity and the dignity of the earth to both be considered in the work that we do. And so that is where I initially got involved in organic agriculture, and really I loved it. I loved working in the fields. I loved driving the trucks. That's where I learned how to do bookkeeping, because you have to figure out how to make sure you have money to do the work. It's where I learned how the kind of the hustle, which is what's connected to, when we think about stewardship and raising money, and it's about doing something that you love, and how do you sustain what you love. And that was very much the experience that I had with that community. And then that eventually I was still working with the Episcopal Church. I was considering ordination at the time, and became a lay chaplain at Cal State Channel Islands up in Camarillo, and connected with some farmers up there who one of those farmers is actually an Episcopal priest. Her family farm is Episcopal priest, and we just got to talking of what would it look like to not just be the progressives with pizza at our campus ministry, but to really create an alternative vision for what community could look like, and what doing something. It was really an experiment of, is sustainable agriculture truly sustainable? Can our ministry sustain our work, and can our work sustain our ministry? And so we started what was called the Abundant Table, an organic farm and internship community up in Ventura County. And that took me deeper and deeper and deeper into the layers, both of the Episcopal Church, but also into the layers of sustainable agriculture, both financial sustainability and what is sustainable for the earth to bear and for those who work it. And I'm just going to say it was really hard. And I learned a lot. I think we all learned a lot, and learned a lot of what I wouldn't say is not possible, but what it just complicates our narratives, and that was very much my experience.
So, like, I had a chance to go out to the Abundant Table, I think, like, maybe in one of the first places that you and I met.
Yeah.
It was in my first, I know it was my first year here because my family wasn't out here yet. They were still in St. Louis. But I went out for like a Sunday evening, Eucharist and meal, and it was beautiful and impressive, and I could also tell, it's like, wow, this is a ton of work. And frankly, if you've spent time with anyone who has done farm labor, you know what sort of work it is. So I'm sort of actually interested in maybe like dive a little deeper. You said, okay, like it complicated our narrative, and like so what are some of the complexities that arose out of that, and what are some of the things that you learned or are still learning from that experience?
Yeah, I think, we got involved in kind of local organic agriculture right at the end, so about 2008. So that's also right when the economic, what was it called?
The downturn
happened. And there was this like kind of exponential growth in local agriculture, in what's called community supported agriculture, farmers markets. And then we hit a point where two things happened. There was a saturation of small farms and farmers markets, and there was not enough demand. But then there was also a downturn in people's economic ability to pay the price that it takes on a small scale to grow organic vegetables. And so about 2010 was when we really saw the height of our financial, like our ability to just grow our business. And then by then you just started seeing a drop off. And when you have values around wanting to make sure people are paid a fair wage and that health insurance is included, and you don't have economies of scale, and so you are doing everything on a small scale, and so you don't also get the larger benefits of, having being able to buy things in bulk, or then you're really facing just high costs all around. And then the consumer, on the consumer side, there's not enough interest or ability to be able to sustain what it really costs to do all of those things. And so a lot of my work was in grant writing to really subsidize those costs. I will add, though, like, all of agriculture is subsidized in some way, not just small scale agriculture. We just talk about it differently. And so I think what was hard for us is we also didn't own land. And so there was an issue of capital. We were always renters. We had to move multiple times. And when you are always having to start over. And when you're doing sustainable agriculture, you're having to get to know a new piece of land. And even if it's just 10 miles apart, it's a completely different microclimate. And you really notice those differences. And so, the beauty was that there was community that sustained us through all of this work. But what was hard was that, under economic stress, that community also felt really stressed. And so I think that was a lot of navigating how do we try to do something different, but also realizing we're working against a larger environment and kind of culture that isn't built to sustain these kinds of experiments without constant subsidies, which can become hard to maintain.
Well, and the subsidy thing is growing up in New Mexico.